Hello guys, and welcome back to another Read This If. Today we'll be talking about The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal. So this book is an adult sci-fi. It's an alternate history of the world, mainly in North America. A meteor has struck the Earth and killed lots and lots of people, and the survivors have to obviously make their decisions to get away from the planet because of the damage that this has caused, although some people want to stay, so it isn't exactly everyone wants to be up there. The main thing that makes this novel unique is its diversity. The main character suffers from anxiety, and we are there for a lot of her attacks, and there are a lot of different women and men of different nationalities because after the meteor struck, the US had to invite a multinational team to come and help out with NASA. The writing is stilted at first, but there are some amazing lines in this one. I found the writing, especially after chapter 4 or 5, to be completely compelling and raced through. There were times when I was almost in tears. The strengths of The Calculating Stars definitely lie in its dealing with misogyny, and it's kind of like calling out the everyday parts of misogyny that people face in science and tech. Obviously this is a lot stronger because it is during the 1950s and 60s when women were expected to be housewives, but you can still see echoes of this behaviour today in the modern workforce. It also has an incredible amount of science in it, which is explained really well, for the most part, to the readers. However, this is also one of the novel's weaknesses, because when Mary Robinette Kowal doesn't explain a piece of science to the reader, then it is really confusing and hard to figure out what is going on there. However, for the most part, it's only the calculations that the main character is talking about that we run into difficulties with this. Most of the time, it is very understandable. I would also say that Mary Robinette Kowal deals really well with female cattiness. Because there are so few opportunities for women in this world, the ones that kind of like are fighting for those opportunities are often a little mean to each other. However, I think Mary handled this really well in terms of the reactions to it and the way that it builds up and the way that it is eventually dealt with. The novel, of course, has some weaknesses. All novels do. As I previously said, the science explanations can be a bit vague or a bit confusing. The main character's relationship with her husband is way too perfect. They never bicker, they never fight, they're just constantly happy and supportive, and he never asks for children, he pushes her to take medication for anxiety, he's completely willing to sacrifice his career for hers, that kind of thing. Like, it just reads too perfect and it's almost annoying. There should be at least some bickering and then a resolution if you want to make him the perfect but realistic man. There is a weakness also in the diversity, the way the diversity is handled in terms of racial prejudice. I felt a lot of times as though the author was trying to prove how inclusive she was by bringing it up, rather than kind of letting it naturally flow from the characters and story. However, it does have a very good message, and I really liked the fact that it was mentioned and brought up again and again. So, as a reader-writer, what can you learn from this one? I definitely think the world building was absolutely amazing. The alternate path that we go through in this world was fully fleshed out with sound bites from the news, with various characters bringing it up, and with obviously some people who disagree and kind of like are outspokenly disagree with the kind of like choices that the government has made. All of this kind of wrap around to make it a very realistic, vibrant world. I also think that the author handled anxiety and bravery really well. The many anxiety attacks that we kind of go through with the character really endear her to us, and we kind of like feel her pain when she has to talk in front of a crowd or explain mathematics. But because of this, we also get to see her bravery and the way that she kind of like is able to still function in a society before being medicated for anxiety was a normal thing and something that people talked about. What can you learn from this as an author or as a reader-writer? Writer-reader. The first thing that I would bring up is the plot pacing. Now, Mary Robinette Kowal has said in interviews that this was originally one book split and now is split into two because there was too much plot, and I think you can see where it is stretched across that gap. It would have done really well as a Brandon Sanderson length novel, I think. It definitely maybe. I haven't read the second book, so I don't know, but the first book does feel a little slow in points, and the plot does drag sometimes. However, I did still think that this was a fantastic book, so please don't take any of these criticisms to mean that you shouldn't read it. The plot was good and was strong, and the characters were all really interesting, but however, I did think the plot could have been quickened and a few scenes removed. I also think that you can learn from this not to make anything in your novel too perfect, whether that's relationships, whether that's, I'm not talking about the writing, obviously, but the world building but inside the world, things shouldn't be perfect. Like, a relationship shouldn't be perfect 100% all the time, a career shouldn't be perfect 100% all the time, and the way that the solutions are not found in this book also appear to wrap up too nicely for me. For example, one of the big conflicts of the book was resolved by someone else kind of like casually mentioning it, and it all wraps up too nicely for me. However, you're going to have to read it to find out what and why, because there are a lot of conflicts in this book, and I'm not going to tell you which one because that would be a spoiler. And that is it. Now, talking about comparisons, there are 3 books I'm going to mention today, 2 that I'm sure of, and then 1 I just wanted to give a quick shout out to. So the first comp for this one is The Martian. This is not so much because of its diversity, although The Martian does have diversity. The Martian's diversity is more of course there are women in the team. It's not even brought up as a problem, and there are, women in government, that kind of thing. The diversity in this is more of the types of people brought on space missions. So for example, the main character is actually a herbologist, I believe. He deals with growing plants, and he's also a scientist in some other ways, but he is not a physicist. He is not a jet fighter pilot. So yeah, the diversity there. But I also think the way that Andy Weir does the science of The Martian is incredible, and if you haven't read it yet and you're writing sci-fi, I would definitely recommend checking it out. The way that Weir explains everything that's going on in the book to the reader and through the form of these diaries that the main character is keeping looks and sounds and feels like you're really there on Mars. The second book is not a book that I have read yet, but it is Becky Chalmers' A Long Way to a Small and Angry Planet. This book deals with diversity in terms of gender, in terms of sexuality, and in terms of race. And it is all about finding a place where you belong with people that you understand. This is a space opera, so it takes place in space. And I've heard that it's an absolutely amazing read, and I can't wait to pick it up. The third and final book that I'm just going to touch on briefly is Brandon Sanderson's Skyward, which is also about a female pilot being prevented from flight. This one is for a much different reason. In her world, pilots are revered, but her father was a pilot and he was a coward, so she is not allowed to fly. She faces a lot of discrimination because of this and because of her fight to become a pilot. Alright, so that is it for me. Let me know if you have any recommendations for videos that I should do, or for books that I should do a read this if for, and have a absolutely amazing week as always.